The phone slipped from his grasp. It was a moment of carelessness, a split second where his attention wavered. He had been walking through the dense forest, the canopy above casting dappled shadows on the ground. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a distant bird. He had been so engrossed in the beauty of his surroundings that he hadn't noticed the uneven ground beneath his feet. It tumbled, a small dark meteor, down the gaping maw of the hole. The phone seemed to fall in slow motion, spinning and turning as it descended into the darkness. He reached out instinctively, but it was too late. The phone was already out of reach, plummeting into the unknown. The hole was like a black void, swallowing everything that came near it. He could hear the faint sound of the phone hitting the sides of the hole as it fell deeper and deeper. He cursed, the sound swallowed by the earth. His voice echoed briefly before being absorbed by the dense forest around him. Panic began to set in as he realized the gravity of the situation. That phone was his lifeline, his connection to the outside world. Without it, he was completely isolated in this vast, unfamiliar wilderness. He shouted again, louder this time, but the result was the same. The forest seemed to mock him with its silence. He hadn't even seen the hole before, hidden as it was by a tangle of dead vines and shadows. It was as if the forest itself had conspired to hide this trap from him. The vines were thick and twisted, blending seamlessly with the underbrush. He knelt down, examining the hole more closely. It was deep, much deeper than he had initially thought. The sides were lined with roots and rocks, making it nearly impossible to climb down without proper equipment. Now, it seemed to leer at him, a black, empty eye. The hole had an almost sentient quality, as if it were watching him, waiting for him to make a move. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he stared into the abyss. The darkness within the hole was impenetrable, a void that seemed to go on forever. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking down there, something ancient and malevolent. He lay on his stomach, peering into the abyss. He tried to see if there was any way to retrieve his phone, but the darkness was too thick. He could barely make out the bottom of the hole, and there was no sign of his phone. He considered his options, but none of them seemed feasible. Climbing down was too dangerous, and he had no rope or tools to assist him. He felt a sense of hopelessness wash over him. The phone was gone, lost in the impenetrable darkness. He knew that even if he could somehow reach the bottom, the chances of finding his phone were slim. It was probably broken from the fall, and even if it wasn't, the battery would eventually die. He sat back on his heels, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. He had lost more than just a phone. He had lost his connection to the world outside this forest. A chill ran down his spine, a prickle of unease. The forest, which had seemed so inviting just moments ago, now felt oppressive and menacing. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made him jump. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was lurking just out of sight. He tried to calm himself, taking deep breaths and reminding himself that it was just his imagination. It was just a phone, he told himself. He tried to rationalize the situation, telling himself that it wasn't the end of the world. He could get a new phone, find his way back to civilization, and everything would be fine. But deep down, he knew that it wasn't that simple. The loss of the phone was a symbol of something greater, a reminder of how vulnerable and isolated he truly was in this vast, untamed wilderness. But something about that hole, about the way it seemed to swallow the light, filled him with a creeping dread. It was as if the hole were a portal to another world, a world of darkness and despair. He couldn't shake the feeling that if he stared into it for too long he might be drawn in, lost forever in the void. He stood up, brushing the dirt from his clothes, and took a step back. He needed to get away from this place, to find a way out of the forest and back to safety. Days passed. He tried to forget about the phone, to convince himself it was gone for good, but the memory lingered, a bad taste in his mouth. Then, one night, he heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from his computer speakers. He sat up in bed, heart pounding. He clicked on the audio file. Silence. Then a whisper, barely audible. He cranked up the volume, straining to hear. The whisper grew louder, resolving itself into a voice, low and guttural. It spoke in a language he didn't understand, each syllable thick with menace. He found the phone's memory card days later, ejected from the computer. He had no memory of doing it. Hesitantly, he plugged it back in. The files were corrupted, fragmented. He clicked on a video, his finger trembling. The screen flickered to life, showing a jumble of distorted images. Then he saw it. A shape, moving in the darkness. It was vaguely humanoid but wrong somehow, its limbs elongated and contorted at unnatural angles. He felt a chill run down his spine, a primal fear gripping his gut. This was no ordinary recording, this was something else, something sinister. The video continued. The shape moved closer, its form becoming clearer with each passing second. Its eyes, huge and black, seemed to stare directly at him, burning into his soul. And then, it began to speak, or rather, to chant. The sound sent shivers down his spine. It was a chorus of voices layered upon each other, rising and falling in a discordant melody. The words were unintelligible, but the feeling they evoked was unmistakable. Terror, despair, and an ancient nameless hunger. He wanted to look away, to tear his eyes from the screen, but some morbid fascination held him captive. The chanting reached a fever pitch, the creature's face filling the screen. Then, a flicker of movement in the background caught his eye. A faint light, like a distant star, pulsed in the darkness behind the creature. It was a small thing, easily missed, but to him, it was a beacon of hope. There was something else down there, something besides that thing. He spent the next few days poring over the corrupted files, desperate for any clue to the location of the hole. The files were a mess of garbled text and broken images, each one a frustrating dead end. But he couldn't give up. He knew that somewhere in this digital chaos was the key to finding the hole. He worked late into the night, his eyes burning from the strain, his mind racing with possibilities. Every now and then, he would catch a glimpse of something, a fragment of an image, a half-formed sentence that gave him hope. He was getting closer, he could feel it. The light, he was sure, was the key. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, an eerie, otherworldly glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that the light was connected to the hole. It was a beacon, a signal calling out to him. He had to find it, to understand what it meant. The light was his only lead, and he clung to it with a fierce determination. It had to be a way out, a sign of civilization. Finally, he found it. After days of searching, he came across a single frame in the corrupted files. It was blurry and distorted, but he recognized the landmark immediately. It was a place he had visited many times before, a place that held special meaning for him. He knew that the hole was nearby and that the light was leading him there. His heart raced with excitement and fear as he prepared to set out on his journey. A single frame, barely a second long, showing a familiar landmark. It was enough to confirm his suspicions. He knew exactly where he needed to go. The landmark was a crumbling old building, hidden deep in the forest. It had been abandoned for years, but he remembered it well. It was a place of secrets and shadows, a place where the past and present seemed to collide. He felt a shiver of anticipation as he set out towards the building, the light guiding his way. He raced to the site, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. The forest was dark and silent, the trees looming like ancient sentinels. He moved quickly, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of adrenaline through his body. He was on edge, but he couldn't stop now. He had come too far to turn back. The light was getting brighter, and he knew he was close. And there it was, hidden among the trees, the gaping maw of the hole. It was larger than he had imagined, a dark, yawning chasm that seemed to go on forever. He felt a wave of fear wash over him as he approached the edge. The light was coming from deep within the hole, a faint, flickering glow that beckoned him closer. He knew that he had to go down there to find out what was causing the light. But the thought of descending into the darkness filled him with dread. He peered into its depths, a sense of dread washing over him. The hole seemed to go on forever, a bottomless pit that swallowed the light. He could see nothing but darkness, an impenetrable void that seemed to pull at his very soul. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He had come this far, and he couldn't turn back now. He had to find out what was at the bottom of the hole, no matter the cost. But this time, he wasn't alone. He had brought a friend with him, someone he trusted with his life. Together they would face whatever horrors awaited them in the darkness. They exchanged a look of determination, and then began their descent. The light was their guide, a beacon of hope in the darkness. They moved slowly, carefully, their flashlights illuminating the way. Every step brought them closer to the source of the light, and to the answers they sought. He had a mission, to find the source of the light, and whatever poor soul might be trapped down there. The descent was treacherous, the walls of the hole slick with moisture. They had to be careful, every step a potential hazard. But they pressed on, driven by a sense of urgency. The light was getting brighter, and they could hear faint sounds coming from below. It was a voice, weak and desperate, calling out for help. They quickened their pace, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. They were close now, so close to the answers they had been seeking, and they knew that whatever they found at the bottom of the hole would change their lives forever. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as he lowered himself into the hole. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something ancient and unsettling. He reached the bottom, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The tunnel stretched before him, carved from the earth. On the walls, strange symbols were etched into the rock, glowing faintly in the beam of his flashlight. They were the same symbols he had seen in the video, the same symbols that adorned the creature's flesh. The tunnel led to a cavern, vast and echoing. In the center, a single light flickered, a lantern, hanging from a crude hook. Beneath it, a figure huddled on the ground. He rushed forward, his heart pounding with hope. But as he drew closer, his blood ran cold. The figure was emaciated, their clothes torn and filthy. They looked up, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and relief. But it was their voice, raspy and weak, that chilled him to the bone. It was the same voice he had heard on the recording, the same voice that had whispered from the darkness. He brought the stranger back to the surface, contacted the authorities. The man he rescued was in a state of shock, his eyes wide with terror, his body trembling uncontrollably. It was clear that whatever he had experienced down there had left a deep and lasting impact on him. The authorities arrived quickly, their faces a mix of concern and skepticism. They took the stranger away, promising to investigate further, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was being overlooked, something important. The official explanation, delusions brought on by exposure, did little to ease his mind. He knew that the human mind could play tricks, especially under stress, but this felt different. The stranger's fear was too real, too visceral. He couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story, something that the authorities were either missing or deliberately ignoring. He spent sleepless nights replaying the events in his mind, trying to make sense of it all. The recordings were dismissed as hoaxes, mere fabrications by those seeking attention or trying to perpetuate a myth. But he had listened to them, every crackle and whisper, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was a kernel of truth hidden within the static. The voices on the tape spoke of things that defied explanation, things that sent chills down his spine. He knew that dismissing them outright was a mistake, but convincing others was an entirely different challenge. The symbols as mere graffiti. To the untrained eye they were just random marks, the work of vandals. But he had seen similar symbols before, in books and old manuscripts that spoke of ancient rituals and forgotten knowledge. He couldn't help but feel that these symbols were a warning, a message from the past that had been overlooked or misunderstood. He spent hours researching, trying to decipher their meaning, but the answers remained elusive. But he knew the truth, or at least he believed he did. He had seen too much, heard too much, to simply dismiss it all as coincidence or delusion. There was a pattern, a connection that others were missing. He felt a growing sense of responsibility, a need to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. It was a burden that weighed heavily on him, but he couldn't turn away. He knew what he had seen in that hole, the darkness that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was as if the very ground was trying to swallow him whole, to pull him into an abyss from which there was no return. The memory of it haunted him, a constant reminder that some things are better left undisturbed. What he had heard on those recordings, the voices, the whispers, they spoke of things that should not be, of secrets buried deep within the earth. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were trying to tell him something, to warn him of a danger that was all too real. He listened to the tapes over and over, hoping to find some clue, some piece of the puzzle that would make everything clear. And he knew that some things are better left undisturbed, buried in the darkness where they belong. The more he learned, the more he realized that there were forces at work that were beyond his understanding, forces that were best left alone. He felt a growing sense of dread, a fear that he was meddling in things that could have dire consequences, buried in the darkness where they belong. The hole is fenced off now, a warning sign posted beside it. But sometimes, late at night, he can still hear it, a faint scratching sound like something crawling up from the depths, waiting for its chance to escape. He knows that the danger is not gone, only contained, and that it is only a matter of time before it breaks free once more. The hole is fenced off now, a barrier meant to keep people away, to prevent anyone else from falling into the same trap. But he knows that it is only a temporary solution, a band-aid on a wound that runs much deeper. The real danger lies beneath, in the darkness that waits patiently for its next victim, a warning sign posted beside it. It serves as a reminder of the events that transpired, a cautionary tale for those who might be tempted to explore the unknown. But he knows that curiosity is a powerful force and that it is only a matter of time before someone else is drawn to the hole, unable to resist the lure of the mystery that lies within. But sometimes late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows seem to stretch endlessly, he can still hear it. A faint scratching sound like something trying to claw its way to the surface. It is a sound that fills him with a sense of dread, a reminder that the past is never truly buried. He can still hear it. A faint scratching sound like something crawling up from the depths, waiting for its chance to escape. It is a sound that haunts his dreams, a constant reminder that the darkness is never far away, like something crawling up from the depths, waiting for its chance to escape. He knows that it is only a matter of time before the darkness breaks free once more, and that when it does, the world will never be the same, waiting for its chance to escape. And so, he waits, always vigilant, always listening, knowing that the true horror lies not in what he has seen, but in what is yet to come.